Hey guys, I know it's been a while. I took a little break to play through the final shape and get some rolls of the exotic class item. I thought the exotic class item would open up a new realm of possibilities. Since I'm a Warlock main, I focus mostly on getting the Warlock exotic class item, Solipsism. Solipsism? I think that's how you say it. Anyway, I'm pretty disappointed with their options, and I really hope that Titans and Hunters are faring better with theirs. The main problem with this exotic class item is that each exotic trait is nerfed. Like Spirit of Necrotic doesn't scale in damage. Spirit of Stag doesn't give you rift energy when your shield breaks. Spirit of Osmiomancy doesn't give you an extra grenade charge. Spirit of the Swarm doesn't cause targets to unravel. On and on. Fundamental and sometimes essential parts of the exotic just aren't there. I understand that they did this for balance, and in some cases, the exotic is still good. Like Osmiomancy doesn't give you a second grenade charge, but it does a really good job at regenerating the grenade that's there. So I guess that's fine. But the thing is that this kind of pigeonholes you into like 2 or 3 really good options. None of how these perks interact is unexpected or surprising. Like using the exotic getaway artist to summon both an arc buddy and a stasis turret feels more prismatic-y than anything offered by Solipsism, at least in the rolls I got, and I got 21 unique rolls. Maybe there's something I haven't seen yet, I don't know. With that said, I do have some exotic class item builds for the Warlock that are super effective, they're just kind of unsurprising. And I'm going to be posting these videos over the next few days. Starting with what I think is probably the most obvious and strongest class item combo, and that's Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Star Eater. Spirit of Inmost Light is based on the Titan exotic Heart of Inmost Light, and like I said, each one of these exotic traits is kind of missing something from the exotic that they're based on. In this case, the thing that it's missing is the extra damage from the Inmost Light buff. So all you get is extra regeneration speed, which is fine because that's really all we need. Now, Spirit of the Star Eater is based on Star Eater scales, and here it just increases our damage, whereas the original exotic both increases your damage and the rate at which you gain super. The thing we want most is the damage anyway. Now, using this exotic class item, this build is all about weaving all of your abilities during ad clear, generating a ton of orbs, and then using those orbs for an extremely damaging super for like a boss or champion or something. So let's get to our subclass. Starting with our super, we want Song of Flame. For our class ability, we want Phoenix Dive. For our movement ability, you can use whatever you want. For our melee ability, we want Arcane Needle. For our grenade ability, we want Storm Grenade. For our aspects, we want Hellion and Feed the Void. For our fragments, we want Facet of Dominance, Facet of Purpose, Facet of Protection, Facet of Dawn, and Facet of Hope. So this class setup has a lot of things that interact, help us deal with champions, and help us deal with bosses. To start, we're using Phoenix Dive because it has the shortest cooldown, and that lets us weave our abilities easier. It also synergizes with Hellion. Hellion lobs solar shots that do like a decent amount of damage and can also ignite, which can take care of unstoppable champions. And anything that you kill with Hellion activates Feed the Void. Feed the Void heals you for everything that you kill and restores grenade energy. We're going with Storm Grenade for 2 reasons. 1, it has a short cooldown, and 2, when we pair it with Facet of Dominance, it jolts targets. This lets us take care of any overload champions. It also does a really good job at ad clear. And when we pop Transcendence, Storm Grenade becomes Freezing Singularity and does void damage, which, thanks to Facet of Dominance, weakens targets. Arcane Needle has 3 charges, but they don't all recharge at the same rate. If you have at least 2 charges left, that final charge charges at some ridiculous rate, which allows us to weave all 3 of these abilities much easier. And we can use Arcane Needle to proc Facet of Dawn, which gives us Radiant and lets us deal with barrier champions. Throughout the entire fight, we'll have some kind of elemental buff, which procs Facet of Hope, causing Phoenix Dive to regenerate very quickly, which procs Hellion, which procs Devour, and so on and so forth. And every time you pick up an orb, you're going to get Restoration, which of these 5 is probably the best defensive option. Finally, Facet of Protection does a really good job at keeping you alive. Now, for our stat priority, we want to get resilience to 100. I saw a comment a little while ago sort of criticizing me for saying that you should get resilience to 100 because I'm not a Titan, I'm a Warlock. Well, I think that person fundamentally doesn't understand what resilience does for you. At 100, it gives you 30% damage resistance, and it gives that to every single class. It gives it to Warlock, it gives it to Hunter, and it gives it to Titan. Having done a bunch of master content, one thing I learned really quick is that it's way way more valuable to be alive. Because if you're dead, you're not doing any damage. You're not helping anyone. In my mind, defense wins championships. So I always put a priority on defense, okay? So resilience at 100. Next, you should probably get recovery to around 70 or 80, then strength at 70 or 80, and then discipline doesn't matter as much. It's nice to get it to 70 or 80, but you don't really need to, and that's thanks in large part to Feed the Void. Ideally, your stats would look something like this: 100 for resilience, 70 for recovery, 70 for discipline, and 70 for strength. For our armor mods, in the helm, you want Kinetic Siphon, Ashes to Assets, and Powerful Friends. And I'm doing these in order of priority. And in your gauntlets, you want Firepower, Bolstering Detonation, and Momentum Transfer. In your chest, you want whatever resistances are going to help you with whatever content you're doing. So like, if there's a solar threat, you might want to double up on solar. It's pretty obvious. For your legs, you want Orb of Restoration, Invigoration, and Absolution. And then finally, for your exotic class item, you want Utility Kickstart, Outreach, and Bomber. All of this works in tandem to generate as much ability energy as possible and to generate as many orbs as possible. If Phoenix Dive isn't available as often as you would like, you could replace Outreach and Bomber with another Utility Kickstart. It still works. I find the ability regeneration with this setup much more even though. Moving on to our weapons, I highly recommend a kinetic weapon with kinetic tremors and attrition orbs. That gives you 3 options: the re-released Origin Story, Midnight Coup, and Multi-Mach. Of the 3, I would go with Multi-Mach, and that's mostly thanks to its origin trait. For your energy slot, I would go with an Indebted Kindness. Indebted Kindness is so good that honestly it doesn't really matter which one you get, but if you get one with attrition orbs, I'd consider keeping that just in case. For your exotic, I would go with either Anarchy or Dragon's Breath. Now this time we are actually going to talk about the artifact. When I started this channel, I didn't talk about the artifact because it was the end of the season and it didn't seem like there was much point to talking about the artifact. But here, I think we can. So starting with the first column, I go with Anti-Barrier Machine Gun and Unstoppable Sidearm, and then a third option for, you know, whatever. In the second column, I go with Authorized Mod Elemental Charge and Winning Hand. In the third column, I go with Elemental Siphon and Threaded Blast. In the fourth column, I go with Void Hegemony, Radiant Orbs, and Galvanic Armor. Final column, I go with Shield Crush and Transference. Truthfully, there are only 4 mods here that matter, and everything else you can move around depending on, you know, what kind of weapon you want to use. So like if you want to use Ergo Sum, you could say replace Elemental Siphon with Overload Sword and Void Hegemony with Blade Stamina. But the ones that matter are Shield Crush, Transference, Galvanic Armor, and Threaded Blast. Since we're using Arcane Needle, Tangles will occasionally spawn, and this really helps with area effect damage. Galvanic Armor is fantastic because it increases your survivability even more since we're using an arc grenade. And thanks to our grenade, we're going to be amplified a lot, like I just said. So Shield Crush does a good job of giving you your grenade back a lot more than you otherwise would. You don't really need it. This build works without it. It just makes it run smoother. And then finally, Transference gives us the damage bonus that we're missing from Inmost Light. So how do you play this build? Well, the important thing to realize is that the Inmost Light buff has a 5-second cooldown. So the idea is to do an ability every 5 seconds, if you can. The way I approach it is to throw a grenade, throw an Arcane Needle, Phoenix Dive, throw a grenade, Arcane Needle, Phoenix Dive. And in the 5 seconds in between each ability usage, I use Multi-Mach to generate orbs. So it's Storm Grenade, Multi-Mach for a couple seconds, Arcane Needle, Multi-Mach for a couple seconds, Dive, Multi-Mach for a couple seconds. And that's what I do all throughout Ad Clear. This should generate enough orbs to power Star Eater scales, and then when I get to a boss fight, I transcend, throw my grenade, activate my super, and do Bird Snap, Bird Snap, Bird Snap, Bird Snap. And you get between 6 or 7 instances of Bird Snap. Now you can do extra to increase the damage during super by doing something like throwing Storm Grenade, throwing Arc Needle, Transcend, throw a Freezing Singularity, pop 2 Anarchy shots, activate super, Bird Snap, Bird Snap, Bird Snap. What you do will depend on how long damage phase is. If it's super long, you can do that. If not, it might just be a good idea to just go straight to Transcendence, throw your grenade, and then go to your super. Either way, it always does a respectable amount of damage, assuming you have the buff from Star Eater scales and you remember to throw Freezing Singularity before you pop your super. Once your super is popped, you can't transcend, so you're kind of SOL with that one. Overall, I think this build is the best Solipsism build you can make. It has everything. It can deal with champions, it's relatively survivable, it's great at ad clear, it does a ton of boss damage, and it'll be good when you don't have the artifact empowering it. Now, I've tried other similar things like Apotheosis and Star Eater, and while that offers a lot of damage from your super, that benefit doesn't outweigh the help you get in neutral from Inmost Light. My one problem with this build is that it's just kinda obvious. But thanks to Bungie absolutely cooking with Final Shape, we have a lot of new people, and maybe this will help them. I got another one of these builds in the works, and the next one's a little bit more unique, but not as strong, and I call it Given a Robe, Born to Munch Crayons. If there are any exotic class item combos for the Warlock that are flying under the radar, let me know and I'll see if I can make a build of them, RNG permitting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.